Hi, guys, and welcome to Mondays with Mike. I have some interesting things we're going to talk about today, including what's happening behind me. Came across a fascinating article this weekend that kind of sent me down a rabbit hole. And the bottom line is this: has a shift in the rainfall in the Sahara Desert contributed to us seeing fewer hurricanes in the Atlantic this year? So just to sort of put this in some perspective, we have had a lot of tropical activity in the United States. For example, we have now had 3 hurricanes make landfall on the United States Gulf Coast. We had Beryl hit Texas, Debbie hit Florida. Both of those were Category 1s, although Beryl was a nasty one, yes. And most recently, Category 2 Hurricane Francine hitting Louisiana. There has not been that much activity out in the big part of the Atlantic Ocean, what we call the main development region. Just hasn't really fired up that much. And there may be a reason. So there was an article, so I want to give her a shout out. Olivia Ferrari is the one who wrote the article and interviewed some of the scientists involved. But it comes down to this. Okay, the source region of our tropical waves that we see in the Atlantic Ocean is here. We always talk about tropical waves rolling off the coast of Africa. Well, this is the area we're talking about here. So here's the Atlantic Ocean, and here is the continent. And this is the rainy season for them when we see these trains of tropical waves and very heavy waves of rain move across these equatorial areas of Africa. So over here from Central Africa, Nigeria, through Ghana, the Ivory Coast, and then moving all the way out toward the west to the south of the Cape Verde Islands, which is why this part of the season is called the Cape Verde season. So typically we'll get strong tropical waves rolling off, and then they will, this time of the year, turn into large hurricanes. That hasn't happened yet this year. And it has been unusual because obviously we expected a lot of hurricanes this year, but all of the hurricanes have been either in the Gulf of Mexico or maybe like one that we have that's forming off the east coast of the U.S. today, a tropical storm. The only hurricane we've had out there in the Atlantic really was Ernesto, just a one-off sort of thing. So this is the area that's known as the ITCZ, the Intertropical Convergence Zone. And that's the area during the summertime where the trade winds come together and there's lift almost the whole summer long, or basically all year long as this shifts north and south. This is where you have tropical downpours almost every day. Well, the desert is up here and they don't get tropical downpours every day, right? It's very dry there all the time. Well, there's a separating line that's called the Intertropical Front, or the ITF. Now, there's a similar kind of a structure here in Texas. You may have heard about it. It's called the dry line. So in West Texas, there is a line, a front, that separates the humid Gulf of Mexico air from the desert West Texas air. Where that comes together, it's called the West Texas Dry Line. Now, this isn't exactly the same thing. This is much bigger, but I think it's a similar kind of concept. So you have this extremely humid, unstable, really stormy tropical air down here. And then you have this dividing line, and then you get the very dry desert air, extremely hot, extremely dry desert air to the north of that line. And then in between, we call that a front, or an intertropical front. Now, it looks like there was some researchers who track the location of this feature called the ITF. And so they're able to know each year where it usually is, where the average location of this is. This year, so far, this has been running about 2 degrees of latitude farther north than it usually does. 2 degrees farther north than usual. So what may be happening, and we don't know with certainty yet, it may be that that is affecting the location of tropical waves coming off the coast of Africa. All right, now for a little bit more of the nerdy stuff. So this map shows sort of more detail about what I was just describing. This map of Africa shows rainfall, and this is rainfall accumulated over the last month. Technically, this is for the month of August. So the bright blues and yellows indicate where the heaviest of the rain fell. On the top side of the screen, on the top of the map, well, that's the desert. So that's why you see white where there's been 0 rainfall. The lines, those squiggly lines in the middle, are that ITF, that intertropical front that I described, that separate the rainy and humid air from the dry air to the north of it. Now, those lines One of them is the average line, and one of them is the line that's been observed for the last couple of weeks. That's the one that has moved farther north, and so rain has crept farther north into the desert. All right, so let me show you exactly what I mean by where the tropical waves exit the coastline of Africa. So behind me, pretty crazy to see, this is a list, a map of all of the Category 4 or 5 hurricanes that have been observed in the Atlantic Ocean over the past 30 years. So I went ahead and plotted all of these since 1994, and then it kind of scared me for a minute that 1994 was 30 years ago. Wow. Okay, so this is a look at all of them, and I want you to notice something that sticks out. First of all, yes, a lot of them head toward the United States and Caribbean, but more importantly to what I want to show you right now is that right there. So we were just talking about, are the tropical waves possibly shifted a little farther to the north this year? Well, that's what I was just pointing out to you, the Cape Verde Islands, and the fact that most of the time these strong tropical waves come off like this, and then they grow into giant hurricanes out here in this area known as the main development region. Well, with that system, that intertropical front that I showed you shifted just a little farther to the north. Notice how every single one of these lines is south of the Cape Verde Islands. If it turns out, and we don't know with 100% certainty yet, but it may be playing a role. If it turns out that those tropical waves are shifted just a little bit to the north, even if it's by 100 miles or a little more, if those waves are coming off here, well, we don't get any of those huge hurricanes. At least over the last 30 years, none of those Cape Verde style Category 4 and 5 hurricanes has started here to the north of the Cape Verde Islands when they come off the coast of Africa. Now, there are some exceptions. For example, there are some storms that might form in the Gulf of Mexico that become Category 4s or 5s. Like, Hurricane Harvey would be a perfect example. But I'm talking about the ones that started out here. All of them were south. So if they're shifted a little farther to the north, that may be contributing to what we're seeing this year, which is that we've seen a lot of activity here and not so much activity out there in the Atlantic. By the way, something to keep in mind is that we are still in the heart of hurricane season. Although the peak of hurricane season is September 10th, we're really still in the thick of it right now. And it may even turn out that maybe the season is sort of backloaded a little bit, so that instead of seeing the peak of activity in the second week of September, maybe it's the third or fourth week. So yeah, history shows us we still have a lot to watch as the season continues. So heading over to another part of the Weather Center now, I've been watching this tropical system that's impacting the Carolinas today. Now, this wind gust there up to 41 miles per hour now, it actually very recently got up to 60. So they've had, by far, well in excess of tropical storm force winds along an area near Wilmington, North Carolina. So this is kind of down near the state line, the upper part of the South Carolina coastline and the lower North Carolina coastline. Big time wave action. There have been squalls coming through here too that have brought some really high winds at times. Part of a system that was yet another one of these so-called PTCs, or potential tropical cyclones. This one, potential tropical cyclone 8. And the thing is, whether or not these things get upgraded to, from a potential tropical cyclone to actually a named system, sometimes doesn't make that much difference, because sometimes the threats are not necessarily high winds, but things like storm surge, and in this case, heavy rain. So it has been bringing some pretty strong wind gusts all along the Carolina coastline, North Carolina coastline in particular, but heavy rain really through the day today and heading into Tuesday. That's going to be the big threat here. This is near Wilmington, North Carolina, and then heading up all around the Outer Banks area, and then all the way inland to Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte. Parts of South Carolina and parts of Virginia as well are going to be affected by this very small but feisty tropical system. And yet another one that has been impacting the United States. As I mentioned before, yes, maybe we haven't had necessarily those big, traditional, major hurricanes that we often see out there because of this potential shift that we've been seeing in the rainfall activity in Africa. But we have seen a lot of landfalls, though, certainly, with 3 hitting the U.S. Gulf Coast, 2 of them hitting the coastline of Mexico as tropical storms, and this other one there off of the east coast of the U.S. As far as what's happening out there through the day today, there's really nothing for us to worry about. Everything's pretty quiet. We got a little guy out there Gordon, that really has stayed a very, very weak tropical system. And just give you a quick view here of the European model futurecast. And I have this running here from today all the way through the end of this week. And as we take a look here at Friday, the end of the week here and beyond, now this will take us all the way through Saturday, there's just not that much going on. The Gulf should stay pretty quiet. We'll keep an eye on a potential wave in the Caribbean Sea and then see what happens with Gordon or anything else that could be forming out there in the Atlantic. But the bottom line is here for the Houston, Galveston area in the short term, this week's weather is just going to be dominated by heat and humidity and not so much in the way of any tropical trouble. However, there's something else that we need to be aware of. So what is that something else that we need to watch out for? Right here, the allergy levels, in particular, ragweed. Ragweed is back. That happens to be one of the nastier allergens that seems to impact a lot of you. So, we have like cedar pollen seems to bother a lot of people. Some people are really sensitive to mold spores, but ragweed is that seasonal weed pollen that pops up every year that seems to affect a lot of people, not just here in Houston, but across the country. Ragweed season usually begins in the fall. Of course, fall begins coming up this weekend with the autumnal equinox on Sunday. But we're in the time of the year, like middle part of September, when we start seeing rises in ragweed. And it doesn't usually go away until we get our first freeze of the year, which averages like the first week of December. So it can last for probably 2.5 solid months. And so this is the highest level of ragweed pollen that we've seen as measured by the City of Houston Health Department. Now, they do take this measurement in the medical center area. And so you could certainly expect that it's going to vary a little bit from place to place, no doubt about that. But just know that we're getting into that part of the year where ragweed can become a really big issue. All right, I've stepped outside here. Let's change things up a little bit. It's actually been just since I just recorded what you just saw, like 5 seconds ago. There was a big hubbub in the newsroom about this pipeline that's on fire, a gas fire over off of Spencer Highway in LaPorte. So at the time you're watching this, it's just about an hour or two after that news broke. So hopefully everything turned out okay. We used some of our weather tools to try and track the plume and winds and things like that. And the only thing we could say is that the winds were extremely light, to 3 miles per hour or less. And the plume was too small to see on radar. Sometimes you can see these things if you look really closely, or sometimes you don't even have to look closely. But in this case, we tried and I just couldn't find it. But hopefully everybody over there is okay. So in the time that we have left here, I want to talk to you a little bit about social media and the push that we're all trying to make. We're in a bit of a transition time right now. People are getting their weather information in different ways. During the old days, you had a TV station and you just picked your favorite one of the 3 or 4 that were out there and you watched it and that was it. Then we transitioned to like having websites and cable weather networks and things like that. And so then you had more choices about where to get your weather information. And now it's all over the place. I mean, you can get weather on TikTok, you can get weather on Instagram, you get weather on YouTube. And so that little piece of the pie that we all get is getting sliced up into smaller and smaller pieces. So anyway, suffice it to say that we've all been at Fox 26 and really probably in media in general, trying to find our little place in social media and what works and what doesn't work and what people see, want to see and what they don't want to see and things like that. So anyway, I say all this because I wanted to invite you to hop on the TikTok. Have you done the TikTok thing? I mean, I guess it depends on your age and whether or not you have kids or not, if you've been introduced to it. It actually is pretty cool, and this is notwithstanding who owns it and all that stuff. But just as the platform itself, TikTok is kind of fun. It is a bit of a time waster sometimes, so you got to watch it, but It's not that much different from Instagram. Uh, but I have tried to make more of a push to reach out to maybe a younger audience on there, people that don't necessarily turn on the TV and hit the remote and turn on Fox 26. So if you follow me on TikTok, it's same thing. It's Fox 26 Mike, and I'm also Fox 26 Mike on Instagram. And I had some successful videos. I don't know how much you've, maybe had a chance to post things and see how they do and things like that. But with the formation and the landfall of Hurricane Francine last week, I had some posts that did really well. I think one of them got about 300,000 views on TikTok, and it had like maybe 250,000 views on Instagram. And then had a bunch of other ones that were 100,000, 150,000, 70,000, 110,000. There were a bunch that were like that, which was pretty cool. But here's one thing that I noticed that actually was a problem, became a problem over the weekend. And that is that if one of my more successful posts was before Hurricane Francine hit. So this was saying, it was like a headline, and it was like, a hurricane is forming in the Gulf of Mexico. Like, that was the headline. Watch out, Louisiana. That kind of thing. Well, the way social media works is that that video kept getting plays through the weekend, even though Francine had already hit and moved out, right? So some new people were seeing it for the first time and thinking, whoa, there's another hurricane out there. Or somebody even commented, how could there be another Francine if we already had a Francine? So then I said to myself, okay, what do I do? I can't go back and edit it and put something on there that says this is old. So I just took the video down, or I didn't delete the video. I just hid it from my feed, so that more people wouldn't see it. So anyway, then that occurred to me that this is like a somewhat of an issue. If somebody posts old information, it still shows up as new on some people's feed, or they call it For You page on TikTok, or like your feed on Instagram Reels. So a reminder that if you see something that looks fishy, just double and triple check it, because it might be outdated. And I'm going to try to be a lot more careful about that if I do post anything that would be dated, or something that's not obvious what day it is. You know what I mean? In fact, I think probably I should start putting a date maybe on the opening screen, that says September 16th or something. Here's a September 16th update, so that way nobody gets it confused. But you live and learn. You live and learn. So anyway, if you would follow me, that would be great. I'm not begging or anything. Not begging that much. We're all trying to make a push here at the station, and each one of us is trying to do our own thing to branch out and reach out. And nobody knows. We do a I've been doing Mondays with Mike here for about 2 years, more than 2 years. Started when we were still home for COVID. So this comes out every Monday. Right now it's every Monday at 1 p.m. It used to be every Monday at 12:30. So I've been doing this, which is fine, which has worked out fairly well. We have a daily show that we do now. I don't know if you've seen it, but in the weather department, it's me, it's John Dawson, it is Allison Gargaro, and occasionally we get a cameo from Ramisha. The only reason it's a cameo is because she works a different shift. This show that we do airs Monday through Friday at 11, unless it's canceled. Like today, we have this big fire. So we're not going to have Forecasting with Friends today, but we have guests. We go in depth about, what's happening in the world of weather, different phenomenon, different, more detail than we would go into. We try to save animal stories for Fridays, because that's like my thing. Is I always want to, like, if somebody has a pet walrus or something, that's the story that I want to show. Or like a caribou likes to eat cheeseburgers at an Anchorage McDonald's. Those are my kind of stories. So I always kid around with the producers When I go over and brief everybody, give them the weather in the morning, and I go over and I'm like, hey, you got any moose stories or is there a runaway swan or something? So anyway, we save those for Fridays generally. Allison and I will set those aside because JD's off on Fridays. So we'll set animal stories for Friday. So it's like Animal Story Friday. And we try to make them weather related, but you know what? Even if they're not weather related, it's like it's our show, right? So who's going to stop us? So I hope you'll watch it. It's Forecasting with Friends. It's Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. on Fox Local. A lot of our programming is going out straight to digital now. So yes, we still have what is called linear. That's what they call like regular TV now. It used to be called TV. Now it's called linear broadcast, as opposed to non-linear, which is streaming. So we might have, like, for example, I think this afternoon, we have 3 different things all ongoing at the same time. We're going to have what we're broadcasting on the air on Fox 26. We're going to have a stream, probably continuing coverage, let's say, of the fire or something like that. And then we might even have, I think, an interview or something going on with the governor. So we could actually be sending out 3 things all at the same time from Fox 26 via, you know what I mean? It's a lot. We have this forecasting show at 11 a.m. So anyway, yeah, so the big, I mean, I hope that you learned something and weren't too, sort of put off by the science nerdy kind of detail of the steering currents and the tropical waves and stuff that come across from the Cape Verde Islands. It's really amazing to see how a small change in one part of the world can have a big effect in another part of the world. They call that a teleconnection, which is how El Nino and La Nina affects things that are many thousands of miles away. So in this case, we're going to keep an eye on that situation over in the Sahara to see if that change in the distribution of rain has any further impacts on our hurricane season. I want to thank you very much for watching Mondays with Mike. And of course, I want to give a shout out to my mom and my brother who are down in South Florida watching. And my knee hurts, and now my brother's knee hurts. Same knee. Isn't that weird? So anyway, hopefully we'll get that fixed. But have a great day, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. If this even airs, it might get preempted by the coverage of this fire that's going on. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. See you next week.